the business. You know how we do it here. We're going straight into the guest segment. I've got Captain Zino, Mario Guy himself. Captain Zino, you're very much welcome to this episode of the business.
Oh, thank you for having me.
What's happening in your sector? A lot of things happening in the aviation sector. Let's go back a little bit. You see the FX crisis. A lot of airlines saying they're looking at leaving the Nigerian airspace because they've got FX backlog that the CBN hasn't paid them, and they are in for business. No airline is literally a non-profit. Obviously, all airlines are in for business. They're in for profit, and they've got this backlog. CBN is not paying them their backlog, and most of them threatening that they're going to leave the Nigerian airspace. But apart from that, we're seeing a lot of crisis in your industry. What's your outlook about the aviation sector?
So there's no industry that's without its problems. So,
Very true.
For example, you mentioned a lot of the airlines are threatening to leave. These are a lot of the foreign airlines.
Yeah.
But they've been threatening for many years. I'm not saying we shouldn't give them their money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's a massive market, which is the Nigerian market. You know, the industry is it's just growing exponentially. So as much as they're threatening to leave, internally, about a year ago, there were over 25 applications to the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to start new airlines and private jet operations, right? So let's not also be deceived, right? If they do decide to pull out and leave, there will be other people that will come and fill the vacuum.
That's right.
So obviously the FX backlog, it's not the most ideal thing. They should get their money because it if they do pull out, it is going to affect our GDP. It's going to affect the economy. It's going to affect even accessibility, people being able to come into Nigeria due to limited capacity. But then again, if they do pull out, it also creates a host of new opportunities for even local airlines that are trying to get into that market. Air Peace, they're now flying to the UK, they're flying to India, they're flying to Dubai, they're flying to South Africa, and they're expounding their routes as well. And so, as I mentioned, there are a lot of issues, but when there are issues, new opportunities are also presented. The same Forex issue is also affecting local airlines in terms of getting access to Forex because the US dollar is the currency of aviation. So all your maintenance is done in US dollars, right? All of your spare parts, the acquisition of spare parts, because things break all the time. Where are you going to get them from in Nigeria? No, you've got to bring them in. And so I think the future is bright. However, it needs to be managed properly. The government needs to assist as much as possible the local airlines to really kind of help them to grow and to establish themselves greater in the industry as well.
Okay, so your industry is one industry that is I love to call it the most regulated industry in the world because pilots, you guys always go for checks every now and then. Apart from that, you see different regulations regarding the state of the art of the state of different airplanes, different airlines. There's so many regulations in your industry. But how you guys, what is the field of play as regards the fuel subsidy removal? After the fuel subsidy removal, did it affect your mode of operations and the high cost of fuel at this point in time? And you see that a lot of the airlines are really increasing their air tickets. It's becoming 100% increase. Couple of airlines, lots of Nigerians, the jackpot syndrome affecting Nigerians at this point in time. Many of them can't afford the air tickets. What is really happening? Is it just the fuel subsidy removal, or there are other underlying issues that has brought about the increase in air tickets?
So it's not just the fuel subsidy removal. Even globally, Jet A1 cost, which is the aviation fuel, is significantly higher even in Nigeria than in other places in the world. Because in Nigeria we don't produce Jet A1, right? So you've got to get it imported, and then you've got the fuel marketers, or they're adding their markup and everything. And so the increase in fuel is a significant issue. However, the airfares that are increasing is also because of supply and demand. When it comes to demand for air services now in Nigeria, it's through the roof. As I mentioned to you earlier, Frank, there's a reason that there's over 20-something applications for people to be starting airlines, and a lot of them are in the process of getting their air operator certificate, their AOC, because business is booming. If business wasn't booming, then people wouldn't be applying to start up both their private jet operations and also commercial airlines. So as the dynamics always happen with supply and demand, when there's a lot of demand, and there's limited supply, your costs are going to end up increasing as well. It's basic business. I run a business, so it's simple. So these, in in conjunction with a lot of other factors as well, significantly increase the cost of the ticket, which isn't ideal because the economy at the moment isn't the best for the average person.
Very true.
But airlines have to survive. Airlines, they have their costs. A lot of airlines aren't even breaking even, and that's the reality about it because they're being hit. And so I think what we do need to do, a lot of us, we tend to complain about airlines a lot, but we actually do need to applaud a lot of them for the fantastic job that they are doing, even managing to stay afloat in tough times like this.
So I said yesterday, the NCAA released a report and said, a communique and said that one of the major things they want to deal with is the fact that a lot of the operators who have PJs, private jet owners, many of them go down the route of commercializing those private jets. And they are saying that they want to put an end to that. Yeah. So you have a PJ, leave it in the hangar, but rather than leave it in the hangar, you commercialize the PJ. So they are saying that if you're a private jet owner, stop using your PJs for commercial use. I don't know if you get my point. Yeah. Putting an end to that. What's your take regarding that? Do you think it's something that is a welcome development in your industry, in your sector? Or why do you think that is happening?
For a wide variety of reasons. So at Zino Aviation, for example, we're into aviation management. We're also into aviation training, pilot training. But one of our subsidiaries is also into private jet charter, private jet acquisition. So obviously, I was very aware of the what the NCAA put out yesterday regarding this. So what basically happens with that is a lot of people, they have their private jets and they feel like, I don't want to go through this rigorous process of getting all the appropriate certifications for commercial air transport. And so I'll just keep quiet, and use my private jet, and people will be paying me directly, and I'll be chartering my jet out and making money for that. Now, obviously, that is fraught with a lot of issues. There are a lot of irregularities, and the NCAA, they vastly audit a lot of commercial operations to ensure the highest levels of regulatory compliance. And so these people, there've been one or two instances, they weren't crashes, there were one or two instances, and when the NCAA investigated further, they found out that this is what these individuals were doing. So the NCAA, they're putting measures in place to really focus in and hone in on this particular issue to ensure that people don't do this. I'm not sure if they've started it, but one was they're going to start, chartering jets, in secret, so to see who's going to take the money. And then they'll hit them with the, aha, I got you kind of thing, right? So it's definitely a welcome development. And I think it's really unfair for a lot of private jet charter companies, a lot of people who charter their private jets. It's really unfair for them to be following all the regulations, ensuring the highest level of service and compliance, and for a few other people who just bought a private jet yesterday to be competing with them at an unlevel footing. So it's definitely a welcome development.
So Zino Aviation, you deal with training pilots, a couple of pilots, and people who are looking at coming into your industry as pilots. Obviously, there might be a kid somewhere watching us, and he's like, remember growing up those days, you hear people, oh, I want to be a pilot and all that. And we don't have this solid infrastructure in this part of the world to be able to, perhaps, I would love to put it, to be able to tutor or be like a guide to beginners who want to go down that route. What's your advice for people who are watching and they're saying, oh, I want to be a pilot, but I don't have the level playing ground. I don't have the enabling environment to make me what I want to be. You are in the industry and you've gotten a lot of people trained in this sector. What's your advice for someone who's watching us out there?
So here's the thing, that's why I founded Zino Aviation in the first place. Okay. So, a little introduction for myself. My name is obviously Capt Zino. I was actually Nigeria's youngest commercial pilot. I was a private pilot at the age of 18. I was a commercial pilot by 19, by 20. I have both a planes license, a helicopters license. I've done training in Europe, in America, in various different places, and I've flown in Nigeria. I flew for many years for Bristol helicopters, and flew offshore helicopters for quite some time. So I've been in aviation for over a decade. But one thing which we noticed was there was a massive gap, and it was a knowledge gap. So a lot of people, they want to become pilots, but the problem is they have no idea how to go about it. So you mentioned, for example, that there's a young child somewhere. I want to become a pilot. Now what do I do, right? And pilots are very limited in number. There are tons of lawyers, there are tons of doctors, but they're very limited pilots. And even getting access to pilots is extremely difficult. A lot of pilots...
But a lot of people say it's an advantage to your industry because the scarcity is actually increases the value of pilots.
Oh yeah, definitely.
the pay grade and value.
No, definitely, it does as well.
Okay.
But thank God now, maybe it's due to social media that's increasing. A lot more people are becoming aware of, so I can go become a pilot. Becoming a pilot, there are not actually a lot of pre-qualification things which you, in essence, need. That's why I was able to become a commercial pilot. Like I said, I was a private pilot at 18, commercial pilot at 19. You just got to be able to, speak English fluently, because English is the language of aviation.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to pass a first-class medical assessment, because pilots have to be in good health. And you've got to be able to have the money. Without the funds, you're not really going anywhere. And so what we did at Zino Aviation was, a lot of people started to reach out to me through my social media, Capt Zino, and, they started to send me DMs. What do I do? How do I become a pilot? And then this was years ago, and I realized there's no one there to help these people. And so we founded Zino Aviation. So we're pilot training, aviation management and consultancy firm, and the purpose of founding it was to help aspiring pilots to become commercial pilots by holding their hand every step of the way. We run a wide variety of services, mentorship services, master classes, and what we do is we send these people who want to become pilots. We vet private flight schools all across the world, in America, South Africa, and all these places, and then we send them over to there. Because as you mentioned, even in terms of capacity in Nigeria, we only have 2 flight schools in Nigeria. Now, one is a government flight school, and I want to be careful what I say online, right? Right? Yeah. But the fact is, there are issues when stuff has to do with government as well. But generally speaking, about 90 to 95% of people, of Nigerians who want to become commercial pilots, they go abroad for their flight training, because we lack that infrastructure, and we lack the amount of flight schools in here. And also, even in terms of going abroad, like as you mentioned, the Jackpot issue, right?
Yeah.
So now a lot of people are even going to get visas, and they're getting denied. And so it's like, okay, so I can't really do my training here. I'm trying to go abroad, and I'm being denied. So these are a lot of the issues that, as collectively as a company, that we're targeting to be able to make it significantly easier for somebody who has the dream to come, to have the dream. We mentor them, we guide them. We have the flight schools, we have the connections. We also do recruitment for airlines as well, to make their life significantly easier.
Okay, so Zino, if I'm gonna ask you any question, is this? It's quite. The knowledge gap is there. Yeah. The demand is there. Mm-hmm. And so for an industry with so much demand, there are a lot of people, newbies, who are looking at coming into your industry. And some of these newbies do not have the financial capacity to be able to withstand the onboarding fees of some of your aviation schools. And there are ways around it. So reason why I'm asking is, there's some people with a dream, but they don't have the resources to fund those dreams.
Facts, yeah.
What are the ways around? I know it's a bit dicey, but what are the ways around it? So, for instance, someone who is looking at going to the university to study a particular course, but doesn't have the financial wherewithal to go to a private school, he has the option of going to a public school.
Sure.
It's much more affordable, and obviously, education is subsidized by the government. So that's another route to achieve the same dream, going to the university. What are the ways around achieving that goal of becoming a pilot without having the financial capacity to be able to fund that dream?
Okay, so there are several ways. It is unfortunate, as I mentioned, when I listed out the requirements, I said, and the main requirement is funds, right? If you don't have the funds, forget it. It's not going to work. So here's the reality. Abroad, 90%, I don't want to give any statistics, I don't have the exact statistics, but the vast majority of people fund their flight training abroad through financing, loans, right? A loan system. You want to become a commercial pilot, like with our most affordable flight school, you're looking realistically at about maybe between $45,000 to $60,000. On more high-end flight schools in different places, you're looking over $100,000 for your flight training.
How long?
It depends where you're training, but realistically looking for about between
the average,
a year and a half, right?
Okay.
If you're training someone like South Africa, which, by the way, in 2021, South Africa trained the most amount of pilots globally in the entire world. Yeah. And so in South Africa, looking about roughly 18 months, but it all depends on your ability, how competent you are, the weather, and various other factors as well, right? So most people, they fund their flight training abroad by financing their training, right? So they got loans and they pay back their loans. But in Nigeria, if you want to take a loan, they're going to hit you what, like 30%?
Poor credit system. Yeah, 30% currently.
30%, which is unbelievable, and nobody can afford that, right? And so the ways which I usually tend to advise people is number one, hit out your state government. A lot of state governments in Nigeria, there are a lot of parastatals as well who also can support you financially, but that's also like a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are applying. A lot of times you need to know somebody. So I teach something called part financing, which is basically you need to basically break down how you finance it. So I'll just give a quick example. Let's say it's $30,000 you need. Okay, do you have $30,000? No. So let's say
that's more than, in perspective, that's more than 32 million naira.
Oh yeah. By far. Okay. But it's just an example. It's even more than 30,000. I just want to just for the sake of the example, right? Yeah. Let's say it's 30,000 you need. How do I get 30,000? Okay, let's say that you save, right? And you save up, let's say 10,000. Because a lot of times, if you're coming to somebody for sponsorship, they want to know what have you brought to the table, right? Before I invest in you, how have you invested in you? Because I can't be all in when you're not all in. So I tell people, let's say for example, you save, 10,000. That's 1/3, so 10,000, right? Yeah. And now you've got 20,000 left. Can you afford to take out a loan of, let's say, 10,000? Is that more realistic for you to pay back? Okay, let's say that you're able to do that. I then tell people, if it's possible and you do have family members or friends or other people in other countries where the interest rate is significantly less, maybe 2%, 5%, right? Maybe you might need to knock on uncle's door and say, hey, is it possible you could do this for me? So let's say they give you 10,000. So now you've got 20,000 out of the 30,000. So the remaining 10,000, if you go to somebody and ask them, hey, Frank, can I have 10,000? It's going to be, it's a lot, especially in this economy, to give someone 10,000. However, if you ask somebody for 1,000, that's a lot more doable for them to be able to help you with 1,000, or even asking an institution or a scholarship board or a charity for 1,000. So I now say all you've now got to do is find 10 people who are going to take a chance on you, and you're basically, they'll give you 1,000 each. Hey, if you can't give me 1,000, can you give me 500? If they can give you 500, you're basically going from
crowdfunding.
You're in essence crowdfunding to be able to do this. There is also scholarships as well, but as I mentioned, the likelihood of getting a scholarship is difficult. And the simple reality behind it is it might just take you some time. I come from the aviation family. My dad's a pilot. He's been flying for a good 35 years. We actually flew for the same company, Bristow, together. It was really cool.
Wow.
We used to go to work together. It was really cool, right?
So good.
It took him over 2 years just to finish the first part of his training. But he would have to work, save up, and he'd go back. And eventually, he became a pilot. I know someone else took him over 10 years of working, saving. So I tell people, if it's your dream, where there's a will, there's a way. You have to have the will, and the way will come by itself.
Oh, my goodness. Zino, Captain Zino, we've done a lot. Taking us through the ropes of becoming a pilot. I think that's really amazing. But what's the outlook of the industry? Where do you see the industry in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? The reason why I'm asking is because putting in perspective what Ethiopia is doing as regards airline, it's like the anchor of the Ethiopian economy. The Ethiopian airline is it's like oil. It's like what oil is for Nigeria. That's what their airline is to Ethiopia. They make a truckload of money from Ethiopian airline. It literally funds more than half of their budget. If we look at their GDP, the airlines, so doing amazing numbers. Do you think we're going to get to that level where the Nigerian aviation sector is going to be like an anchor for the Nigerian economy?
I do believe so, right? I have faith,
yeah.
right? But I'm also realistic as well. I believe we will be able to get to that place, providing we have the right government support, providing we have the right leadership, right? And the truth about it is, with ineffective leadership, with not a lot of focus on aviation, and there's so much focus on oil, right? Ethiopia realized, hey, we don't really have oil, so we have to make the best out of what we have now.
Very true.
And I think in Nigeria, we have to have on a leadership level people to really switch on and say, hold on a minute, maybe we need to diversify and really focus on aviation. Nigeria is the hub of aviation in Africa, right? We have how many million people in this country? Like over 200, 220? Nobody even really knows, right? But there are a lot of people. And the ability is definitely there to replicate and even supersede what Ethiopia are doing. But we definitely need that support. In terms of where the industry is going, as I mentioned, airlines are starting up every single day. Just the other day, I was with several MDs of different airlines because we're in talks to offer our services to individual airlines, and there are more that are even opening up. And I truly believe that if we wake up, we have that reality, we have the right investment, we don't chase off our people who are coming to invest, but we make the environment really, really suitable, really conducive for them, we can get that investment and we can definitely expand. There's a young lady who I was talking to the other day. She reached out to me because she's trying to become a pilot as well, and she's even going into SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels. Virgin Atlantic, they did their first ever, I think it was their first transatlantic flight solely on sustainable aviation fuel.
Wow.
Right? Like this is a game changer, right? Sustainable aviation fuels are estimated to reduce carbon emissions by 80%, right? So this is huge. Even so there's opportunities for that if we pay attention to that, right? And we really harness that possibility. After COVID, a lot of people were flying private jets, or during COVID, they realized, hey, I need to travel, but I can't really travel or travel efficiently.
Very true.
A lot of people bought private jets. So in Nigeria now, there are over about 120 private jets that are moving. However, on a global level, when it comes to Africa makes up 2%, only 2% of global private jets.
Are you going to blame Africa? I think if we put it in perspective, we'll see that Africa, we don't have disposable income to be able to afford that. We're still looking for the basics. So it's a market for the 1% of the 1%. If we look at it, if we're truthful about it, especially in Africa, it's a market for I love to call them the bourgeoisies. If we look at it that way. So if we put Africa in perspective, I think that data is really something to go by. So do you think it's the African economy? We're not yet there. There are a lot of basics that we're still trying to focus on, and that is really one of the reasons why you feel the industry is still barely scratching 2% as regards the global landscape.
Yeah, definitely. But one thing as well is, for example, I mentioned even with the private jet section, there were a lot of private jets. People started buying private jets during COVID. So a lot of times you don't really focus on a particular segment because you don't really know that you need it as much until something comes out and makes you realize, hey, in America, there are over 25,000 private jets in America. In the entire African
there are over 10,000 airports.
Exactly. and that's why, because you asked about the industry. In Nigeria, we are building new airports. Like every year, there's like a new airport that's coming up. Anambra built their airport, and different people are building other airports as well. And what this does is it enhances connectivity, right? So the more airports there are, the more connected that we can be as people. The more people can start traveling more. And all of these things accumulate into affecting your GDP, affecting employment, affecting a lot of these things. So the more airports we can build, the more airlines we can start up. Even companies like Ibom Air, they've now got, or they're working on an MRO facility, and other companies such as 7-Star Hangar. And an MRO is simply a maintenance facility to be able to conduct maintenance in the country, because there's vast amount of capital flight that's happening in the country. For example, 100% of airline pilot training is done abroad. Pilots, you mentioned it earlier about how we're assessed every 6 months. So where do we get assessed? Abroad. So that's all the airlines that are paying money for plane tickets for all of your staff to go abroad, your pilots and other people who need to do training abroad, right? So that's capital flight. Maintenance, the plane has to fly abroad. That's capital flight.
That's right.
And so I believe if we can get it right in the Nigerian aviation industry, and we focus we support these airlines, like I've mentioned, and these MRO facilities, and we support the governments which are building airports, I really do believe that we can build something monumental and fantastic here in Nigeria.
Captain Zino, I say nothing. I have nothing else to say. You've said everything. Thank you very much. Amazing time with Captain Zino.